Suddenly, he struck me across the face. As the booming smack echoed through the quiet room, I felt a mix of pain and shame. My cheeks were boiling from the impact as well as the embarrassment of being smacked by someone I trusted and loved. As Ryan stormed out of the house with angry eyes, I was left speechless and heartbroken. I realized then that everything had been irrevocably changed by his cruelty and betrayal. Greetings. I am Jessica Adams, a 24-year-old. After 6 years together, I believed I had found my soulmate. Ryan Miller is 25 years old. When we became engaged in April 2024, I was overjoyed and excited for a future filled with love, laughter, and family. Our wedding took place in May 2025. The anniversary of our first meeting is being celebrated on this memorable day. I thought that right now, everything in my life was going well. I had no notion that heartbreak was on the horizon. I was completely focused on organizing our wedding in July 2024. I immediately started organizing the details after deciding on the gorgeous light blue and white theme for our spring wedding. I spend hours on Pinterest, create mood boards, and consider every aspect of our special day. After researching the following venues, caterers, and flowers, I submitted Ryan as my top choice. His responses were always succinct, disdainful, and uninterested. "Looks good," he would say, or he would just give a thumbs up. I convinced myself he was just busy with his work and wanted me to have the freedom to plan the wedding of my dreams. But it was long ago that I should have seen the signs of trouble. The disengagement of Ryan did not end with the wedding. His mother, Karen Miller, was always there in our connection. Since Ryan was the only child, Karen had always played a big part in his life. First, as time passed, I grew to value their intimacy, seeing it as a sign of his care for his family. I became conscious of her oppressive power. Several times a day, Ryan would call her and ask her thoughts on everything from lunch options to issues that should have been decided between us. He would talk to her before talking to me, and I often felt like the third wheel in my relationship. It should have been obvious that I was competing for his attention with his mother, but I kept telling myself that things would get better. I assumed that after we were married, he would at last begin dating. To begin with, I was wrong. I had been anticipating this day for years, and 2 weeks ago I went shopping with my mother and sister to acquire my wedding gown. It was supposed to be a lovely moment that I would always treasure. I eventually discovered the one after trying on dress after dress at several boutiques. In that stunning gown, which was timeless and exquisite, I felt like a princess. I imagined myself walking down the aisle with tears in my eyes as I stood in front of the mirror. As they complimented my beauty, my mother and sister were beaming with joy. I couldn't wait to tell Ryan about this encounter. I emailed him a picture of myself in the dress, hoping he would be as thrilled as I was. He replied. I was briefly ecstatic at seeing how beautiful it appeared. I didn't realize at the time that he had immediately given the image to his mother, setting off a chain of events that would turn my perfect day into a nightmare. Karen, my future mother-in-law, was furious when she saw the clothing. She called me multiple times while I was still out, but I didn't answer, reasoning that it could wait till I got home later that day, feeling happy and hopeful. I was confronted with an entirely other reality. Karen had navigated our house by herself using the spare key we had given her for emergencies. She waited for me on our couch, her face twisted with anger. In a moment, the happiness I had felt was gone. Karen sprang up as soon as I walked in and, in a harsh tone, accused you of deceiving me. Startled and confused, she screamed. I asked her what she meant to say. According to her, her old wedding gown, which was so out of style that it honestly looked like it belonged in a museum, was something I had pledged to wear years ago. I was surprised. I couldn't recall ever making a promise like that. Furthermore, even if I had said something kind of years ago, there would still be no legally binding commitment. But Karen didn't want to hear my explanation. She called me a liar and said I didn't deserve to marry her son. Her remarks destroyed my heart, leaving me speechless and devastated. I kept looking for Ryan, hoping he would show up and defend me, but he was nowhere to be found. I tried to reason with Karen, but she would not listen. The louder her voice, the more serious her accusations. I finally reached my breaking point. I walked to my room feeling ashamed and defeated. Even with the door shut, I could still hear her shouting. Before I heard the front door slam, it felt like an eternity. After a few seconds, Ryan came into our room and didn't appear to know what had happened. He asked me why his mother was so unhappy, as if he hadn't heard her yelling from wherever he had been hiding. I felt a surge of surprise and anger. I told him everything in the hopes that he would understand me, and he moaned and started to defend his mother. Ryan mentioned that when we initially started dating 6 years ago, I had admired his mother's clothing and said I wanted to wear it. I would promise that I would never wear it again on my wedding day, even if I had said anything polite at the time. Ryan insisted that I was being unreasonable and that his mother had a right to be offended. I went to bed that night, feeling very dissatisfied and alone. I laid in bed that night, replaying every second of the discussion, wondering how it had all gone so wrong. The man I had trusted had chosen to help his mother after 6 years of love and trust, even though she was clearly at fault. My unease and anguish grew as I tossed and twisted. I thought about everything I had given up, the times I had put his family's demands before my own, and what it would have been like to be seen as a liar and an outsider in my relationship. The morning after, when I woke up, I was inundated with SMS from Karen. They were all loaded with charges and insults like daggers. She called me selfish, ungrateful, and unworthy of marrying her darling son. As I read her harsh comments, tears filled up in my eyes. That someone I had put so much effort into winning over could be so unfaithful astounded me. Ryan rejected the texts instead of supporting me, despite my sharing them with him, in the hopes that he would see the cruelty and suffering his mother was causing. "I think she's just upset that you don't want to wear her dress," he said dismissively. "Simply allow her some time to unwind." It was incredible what I was hearing. Karen was not merely injured. She was actively trying to damage our engagement and cast me in a negative light. I felt a surge of anger and bitterness. The focus had shifted away from the outfit. Respect and support were essential. Having a spouse who would stand up for me and put our relationship first was crucial, and Ryan was not that kind of person. I made an effort to clarify things for him. I explained that I should feel beautiful and comfortable in the dress I selected because it was our wedding. I even suggested a few workarounds, like wearing a piece of Karen's jewelry or incorporating some of her dress fabric into my veil, but none of them were successful. Ryan insisted that if I didn't wear the entire dress, people would think I wasn't grateful that IT was all or nothing for him and his mother, and I was starting to feel like I didn't belong in this system. In the days that follow, there is a lot of tension and fighting. Karen continued her campaign against me by sending nasty texts and reaching out to some of my friends to turn them against me. Ryan did nothing to stop her and seemed to agree with her more and more, so I felt like I was the problem, the illogical one. I believed I was the only one going crazy because I wanted to wear my dress on my wedding day. Then came the moment when everything fell apart. The tension between Ryan and me had reached a breaking point. I realized that we needed to have a serious conversation to determine whether our relationship was even worth maintaining. I waited till he got home one evening because I wanted to show him my side. I told him how heartbroken I was, how lonely I felt, and how his mother's constant interference was destroying us while we sat in the living room. I explained to him that this was supposed to be our wedding, not his mother's opportunity to relive her glory days. But instead of listening, Ryan started to get defensive. His words were, "You're overreacting. The wedding is about family, not just us. It's for them, too." I felt like I was being slapped in the face by his comments, and I realized how much he loved his mother. I tried not to get angry, but my irritation exploded. I asked him, "Ryan, will you marry me or your mother, since you appear to be more committed to her than to us?" The question upset him. He started ranting, and his face twisted in anger as he accused me of being arrogant and overstating the circumstances. Once again, I was brokenhearted. I told him that I was seriously considering ending our engagement and that I couldn't marry someone who wouldn't stand up for me. He dismissed my concerns, which were more painful than words could describe, and claimed that I was having a tantrum. I tried to depart to defuse the situation before things got worse. However, that's when things became out of control. Ra grabbed my arm, flung me around, and slapped me across the cheek. My cheek ached from the impact, and I felt like my heart had been betrayed. I found it challenging to believe. He struck me. The man I thought I would spend the rest of my life with has become violent. I stared in disbelief with tears in my eyes as he rushed out of the house, slamming the door behind him and retreating to his mother's side once more. I felt broken and numb. The physical pain of the slap was nothing compared to the mental damage. Now that he was across this final line, there was no going back. I knew I had to protect myself at that point. I grabbed my phone and called my sister, Lauren. She came over in terror as soon as she saw the red mark on my cheek. Her eyes were burning with anger and concern as she hugged me for protection. "I'm bringing you along," Lauren said. Together, we firmly packed a bag for me. I knew that I could not stay there. Another second since our relationship was over, I had to make sure Ryan never treated me badly again. As we left, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness, but I also knew that I was doing it morally. The morning after, Lauren was by my side, and I knew what I had to do. At the police station, I asked for a restraining order against Ryan. Pictures of the red stain on my cheek and the letters from Karen demonstrating the toxic behavior I had endured for so long were provided. The process was both empowering and devastating. It felt surreal to take such severe action against someone I had truly loved in the past. However, I knew I had to protect myself. After the paperwork was submitted, I made the difficult but necessary choice to call off the wedding. I phoned the venue to explain the situation, and to my surprise, they were understanding and empathetic. When they allowed me to transfer the deposit to another event, I decided to use it for an early birthday celebration. It felt wonderful to turn something unpleasant into a celebration of my newly discovered power and self-reliance. I did lose part of the money, though, because the caterer was less accommodating. But at the time, I was just happy to leave the wedding. Drama. Wearing the engagement ring, a symbol that had once given rise to such optimism, seemed burdensome. Ryan refused to take it back, saying it was a gift. I didn't want to retain it, so I decided to sell it and donate the proceeds to a domestic abuse shelter. It was a small way to turn something painful into something valuable and gave me a sense of closure. Despite the restraining order being in effect, Karen kept trying to guide the narrative. She launched a smear campaign against me, disseminating untrue material on all social media platforms. In an attempt to gain support, she also reached out to other of my family members, accusing me of being a selfish, ungrateful bride who had broken her son's heart. But my true friends and family were able to recognize her dishonesty and stuck with me. It felt comforting to be surrounded by individuals who believed in me and supported my choice. Ryan, on the other hand, was an absolute wreck. He alternated between begging for my forgiveness and holding me accountable for all that had happened. He unexpectedly showed up at my new apartment one evening, sobbing violently and pleading with me to welcome him back. The sight of him, so familiar now, so undesired, made my skin crawl. The fact that I had to threaten to call the police before he left only made me more determined. There was no turning back, to continue and find peace. I depended heavily on my support system. My parents, who were furious when they learned about everything, helped me take the rest of my belongings out of the apartment where I had a residence with Ryan. They offered to cover any legal fees I might need, letting me know I wasn't alone. Some of my friends were supportive, while others couldn't understand why I hadn't simply dressed in the same way to keep the peace. Even though those relationships soured, I finally decided it was best because this experience had shown me who my true friends were. As the weeks passed, I slowly started to rebuild my life. The early birthday party I hosted at our wedding venue turned out to be a beautiful occasion surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me and supported me. As I laughed and danced, I felt lighter than I had in years. The laughter and joy that filled the room reminded me of my newfound strength and the freedom I had fought for. I'll never forget that day because of the healing and joy that followed the pain. Additionally, I made the most of my planned honeymoon trip with Lauren. We made it a sister adventure I would never forget by traveling to Paris, which I'd always wanted to visit. We enjoyed deep conversations, ate French cuisine, and took walks around the city, all of which helped me feel whole again. It wasn't the romantic retreat I had hoped for, but it was exactly what I needed, a trip that paid tribute to love and perseverance in a special but equally important way. I focused on getting better at home. To heal the emotional scars left by my relationship with Ryan, I started going to therapy. It was challenging to face the warning flags I had ignored, the compensatory promise I had made, and the weakened sense of self-worth I had encountered along the way. But each session helped me become more self-aware and taught me to trust my intuition. Additionally, it gave me the tools to set limits and value myself, ensuring that I would never settle for anything less than the respect and affection I deserved. Ryan and Karen progressively vanished from my life after we signed the restraining order and mutual no-contact agreement. Ryan's desperate attempts to win me back progressively faltered as others realized the truth, and Karen's XME campaign lost steam. Ryan's father sent a private message apologizing for everything, which was an unexpected response. He expressed his understanding of my choice and his best wishes for me in a small act that meant more to me than I could have ever dreamed. No matter what, my family was there for me. My parents remained unwavering in their support, even though they were upset over the slap and the violence I had witnessed. Most of my friends banded together to help me, and I will always be grateful to those who truly cared for me. It was also a healing process when people drifted away from me because they didn't understand why I had spoken up. I had learned to surround myself with only positive people. The engagement ring, which had once stood for a promising future, was now a sobering reminder of what I had survived. Selling it and giving the money to a shelter for victims of domestic violence was one of the most empowering things I have ever done. It appeared to be a way to regain control over my life and turn my suffering into something positive. People often ask me if I have any regrets. The truth is, this experience taught me some of the most important lessons I have ever learned, even though it was quite unpleasant. I learned to trust myself, value my happiness and health, and never settle for anything less than what I'm worthy of. I'm not ready to date again just yet, but I'm sure that when I am, I'll approach relationships with a better understanding of my needs and wants. I will never again ignore warning flags and will always prioritize respect and teamwork. For the moment, I'm content to focus on myself. I'm returning to things I had put on hold, spending more time with friends and family, and rediscovering who I am. Outside of relationships, I'm stronger, sharper, and more resilient than I ever thought possible. And for the first time in a long time, I'm genuinely hopeful about the future.